Welcome back to the MMA Museum. I am the MMA history guy, Miguel Adorati, and I am joined for another great interview by an MMA fighter, a blast from the past. And I'm joined by the Crazy Cuban, Roli Delgado, Rolando Delgado. How you doing, Roli?
I'm fantastic. Just getting home from the gym and excited to talk to you.
Well, I appreciate it, and so do the fans out there. Definitely going to be good to catch up with you. Let's start from the beginning. Are you Cuban American, like born here, or were you born in Cuba? Where's the nickname come from?
Yeah, so my father, my grandfather, that whole nuclear family came here in the late '60s. My mother was white, and so yeah, I was born in California, and the nickname was just a goofy nickname. I had a guy I used to work with. He was going to go watch me fight on Beale Street when I was an amateur, and he would call me the Crazy Cuban, and he would just mess with me, and so I just kind of used it as a nickname, and it stuck. So it just
That's cool. You
that's
speak
it.
Spanish, don't you?
No, I don't. I obviously wish I did, but I was mostly raised by my mother, who's white. So I'd see my
Okay.
dad, on the weekend sometimes, but I just never learned it naturally and didn't put enough energy into learning it as an adult.
Okay, so now let's get into the stuff you did learn here. So somewhere along the line, martial arts creeped into your life here now. So somewhere along the lines, as martial arts creeped into your life, you were competing pretty young, and
Yeah.
why don't you talk about how that, what you did during high school and sports and stuff like that, and how you got into martial arts?
Yeah, I was always fascinated by it, and I grew up as a kid until I was 15 in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Um, I was always fascinated by it, by fighting. I couldn't fight. I wasn't a tough kid. I was very unathletic, very skinny, and I wished I could. Never took lessons as a kid. And then my mother forced me to get involved in something at school. She must have read an article in like Woman's Day or something. She's like, you got to do something at school. And so I ended up wrestling for 2 semesters, and doing some off-season work in Philadelphia. And then I moved to Arkansas in 1998. And there was not wrestling here yet. Now, while that's all going on, I'm exposed to the UFC and some other early MMA events, on pay-per-view. And my buddy had a pay-per-view box. And so with that little bit of wrestling I did, and I wasn't a very good wrestler in school, but with that little bit of wrestling I did, I was watching these fights, and it was just very intuitive to me that was what a real fight would look like. People would be trying to tackle each other. This idea that I would just uppercut you if you shot a double leg on me, and I wouldn't let you take me down. Like, that was all nonsense. It was very intuitive to me. And so, of course, I saw Hoist. I'm very fascinated with it. I moved to Arkansas. There's no wrestling. Started doing like a little Kempo karate with other kids in school. I don't think it was real Kempo. I think the guy was just one of these like fake Navy SEAL guys of that era, like teaching stuff. But then I found where Matt Hamilton was teaching, a guy named Danny Dring owned a gym, and Matt Hamilton was teaching there. And so I started training there, and sometime in like late '98, I believe. And we were doing jujitsu. I had a little bit of experience wrestling, so I had balance. I was picking up the jujitsu pretty well, and it just kind of snowballed from there. The Danny Dring was promoting events, and before when you have a coach that has a fight show, you're always getting asked, "Hey, would you like to fight? Would you like to fight?" And that's a real easy way to get into MMA if your coach is or the gym owner is promoting MMA. And so I started doing amateur, and you know what it was like back then.
Oh, for sure. That's a blast from the past, the Danny Dring, because I talked to Matt, and I'm not sure we went over that name. If he did, I didn't latch on to me, but that's a hardcore name from the old days. And I remember that event there, and he would bring you guys over to our show too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so this was circa '98, and we met in there somewhere. But let's talk about. I'm gonna look up here. Hold on, and it looks like in '99, you actually got into something called the Arkansas Regional and fought James Sparks, and that was your debut on the databases. What do you have to say about that? Was that your actual debut, or what's going on?
I don't even if that was the year, like 99, something like
Yeah.
that, 2000, like for sure that was my debut. It was uh some taekwondo black belt. We got out there. The very first fight was very underwhelming. We get out there, we're kind of bouncing around. He kicks me in the leg, and we get into a clinch. And I don't remember executing a specific takedown, but I land on top of him. And then he said he hurt his shoulder. He might have freaked out because we were on the ground then. I don't know. So it was like pretty uneventful. And I won my debut. I just remember going to Waffle House afterwards, and my leg was just killing me. And I couldn't believe how much my leg was hurt from that one kick. Because I didn't feel it in the fight, but it felt like nothing. It just felt like impact. And then that evening, just a couple hours later, I'm going to Waffle House, and I was like, "Oh man, my leg's sore." Those amateur fights that Danny used to put on, I really liked that as an entry point because he didn't allow strikes on the face on the ground. So we're like pretty green guys out there with these 4-ounce gloves on. But when you hit the ground, there was a bit of action, like grappling and stuff, because you weren't just getting, and we were also fighting in a ring most of the time. So it was kind of neat. I thought that was a good way to kind of creep into MMA. It worked for me.
And now you're talking about you got a little bit of a wrestling background, and you try this new sport, and you've got an unusual build at the very beginning because you're like close to 6 feet tall, if not right there. And
I'm almost 6'3". I'm pretty tall. I was like at one
yeah,
point the tallest 45er.
but you started out at 35, didn't you?
I was 35 when I was real young. And I remember, I think the last fight I might have done at 35 was the Danger Zone tournament, Dan Severn's amateur tournament, and I made 35, and I about killed myself making that weight. Yeah, so I was 35 like in college, and it was the last time was really tough. And then I went to 45, and then there was really no 45, and it was 55, and then back to 45, and then ended up in the UFC, and there wasn't a 45 yet, so it was 55. So just kind of bouncing around there.
Yep. And I remember, 6'3", 135, even though you only did a few fights at that definitely stood out in the early days. And then with, Hamilton, another pedigree 35er, Arkansas was starting to look dangerous there with let's talk about that Danger Zone tournament, because you won a 4-man tournament, I believe, and it was Danger Zone 9.
Pablo Anchondo and some other guy, some
Tommy
Sambo guy.
Hoover.
Tommy Hoover. Okay. I haven't even thought about that in a long time. Yeah. Gosh, what was the first fight there? The first fight was the Tommy Hoover.
They talk about the Severn and dealing with.
Well, I was a kid, and he was one of my favorites because he was a wrestler, and because I had done a little wrestling, I thought I was a wrestler too. I really looked up to him, and I was getting coffee at whatever hotel we were staying at for the Danger Zone. And I'm it's the cheap little like pump coffee things. And I'm getting coffee, and right next to me, this guy's getting coffee. And I looked over, and it was Dan Severn, and he was shorter than me. And it just really threw me off. I was like, oh, wow, I was a much bigger man than I am. But that was my first experience with, my first time meeting him. And I talked to him, and he was friendly. And but I never really dealt with him on the at the show much. That was the woman that he was working with, Becky Levi. Is that right?
Yeah, Becky Levi.
Yeah. I think she kind of like was running fighters meetings more and stuff. But he was nice, and it meant a lot to me after I won that tournament to have him come in the cage and present me this Danger Zone plaque. I still have it, and it meant, as a kid watching Dan Severn on TV, and then him coming in the cage and presenting you with an award for beating 2 guys in his show. It was a good feeling.
That's cool too. Yeah, for sure. Dan, he had his hands in fighting and then running the shows, and he let people, Becky ran it for him and stuff. And there's always little stories there. It's funny that at 135 pounds, you're probably exactly about half his size.
No, yeah, yeah, he could have eaten me for sure.
So as we progress here, this is going down still in the amateur, and you go back, Tommy Rathbone, Dustin Campbell. I assume those are fights that you did for Danny. Is that right?
Um,
You
I don't even remember these guys.
okay? That's cool. And that
Yeah,
you
you
know,
know, those amateur fights. If you tell me the cities, I might. There was one guy. Would have been like my last amateur fight on one of Danny's shows in Hot Springs, Arkansas. I don't know if that's on the.
let me
If
check
any
the
of that.
pointers here, and I'll let you know. Because at some point, you know, you go through the process of turning pro, and
Yeah,
usually that just means it's pretty much the same thing, except for you're now going to get paid something.
yeah.
Um, and
My
the only
my 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 last amateur fight was against a kid that had a few fights, and he was a real good looking kid. Really wanted me to fight this kid, and it was going to be my last fight. And I remember I was wearing the pink singlet because I looked up to Matt so much. He was leading the way, and he was so freaking tough. And so I wanted to wear the pink like he did, and he didn't mind because I was I don't know, I was probably his top student. I think I was, and so I fought this kid, and I remember I just threw a head kick early and knocked him down. And they did standing 8 counts in this MMA show, and so they gave him a count, and we get back to fighting, and somehow I end up on top of him, and I stood up out of his guard, and I did a double Sakuraba stomp. I only had one foot land on his chest, but I stomped it, and then I backed up, and I did a front flip and double heel kicked him in the chest. And then he came on top of me, and I ended up triangle or armbarring him. I don't remember exactly. But it was like the flow state, like I was just out there. I kind of like hit him early with a shot and just felt so loose, and was just doing all sorts of fun, goofy stuff, influenced by Sakuraba, of course. And that was probably one of the most fun experiences I've had is my last amateur fight, because everything I was doing was working, and I was just loose as a goose out there. And that was a pretty
was
cool
that in
way
Sherwood?
to close out the. That one would have been in Hot Springs. So if it's not on that list, it must not have got reported, because I had
Okay.
9 or 10 amateur fights. I believe I had 10.
Okay, I'm short of that. I think I got 5 on the database I'm looking at here. Now, some of these may be mixed up here. At some point, you've had a mixture of fights here, and you were a good 8-0, 9-0, right around there. Do you remember being undefeated? And maybe
Yeah.
hearing your name come up.
Yeah. So what happened was I had a really rough patch early in my MMA career. So I was undefeated as an amateur, and then I won my first 3 fights. So I did a 4-man tournament in Bethalto, Illinois, just outside of St. Louis. I fought a guy from Militech's, and then I fought another guy from Rafael Levato's school. And so I won my 2 fights there, ended up winning another pro fight somewhere. And so I'm 3-0 as a pro. And then I dropped 3 fights in a row. And they were a tough 3 fights. I had Joe Jordan, who fought Hermes Franco in the UFC, Jason Ireland, who fought, I forget what Japanese guy he fought in Judo. Yeah, Ireland, you know who Ireland is.
Yeah.
And then I fought
I did the next one to you.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
that's exactly, you hit it right on the head. It's like we're not scripting this, but it's like we did, because I was going to talk to you about, you had your amateur fights, and then, you some pro fights that were 3-0. But that's a nice streak of like a good 10 fights overall that you won. But you did all of a sudden get that jump in name recognition of the opponents. Joe Jordan probably has 75 fights, probably wound up with 75 career fights, and a real hard-nosed guy. What was that fight like?
I mean, no ill feelings or any excuses, but he wrestle fucked me, and I didn't get any of my submissions off. He was casing my hips and just nothing really happened in the fight. I was in my guard for 3 rounds, and he beat me in a clear decision. You know, I think there were some times maybe he was standing over me, and I was, you know, throwing some up kicks or something. But he dominated the wrestling aspect of the fight. That was my first loss, and yeah, it was what it was. Just kind of like one of them fights where you're just like, you know. We couldn't throw elbows on the ground in that fight. It was like when Shudo was trying to have like an American circuit. And so not an excuse, but like he was burying his head in my chest. And so I couldn't really get any power with my lanky arms, and I wasn't able to elbow. Maybe not made a difference because he was winning the wrestling. I would have had to sub him to win. But yeah, that was a tough one. The Ireland fight was a close fight, but a good decision. He beat me, but it was a good fight. And then Masvidal was like a real banger of a first round, and then man, I just couldn't keep up with him, and he put me away in the second. I mean, physically, I just couldn't. I mean, he was a much better striker than I was. He was very relaxed. He was just I mean, Masvidal was the fight. Masvidal's fight, and Andre Winter beat me clean with a knockout, and that was going to happen that night. Technically, that was going to happen, especially for where I was mentally and how I was approaching that fight. But George Masvidal was probably the only guy, and I was in the mix. I mean, Matt thinks I won the first round. I might have, I might not have. He finished it pretty strong, but I took him down. I landed some great leg kicks on Masvidal. But Masvidal, that was like one guy that I fought. Like when I was in there with him, he was better than me. You know, I had some moments, but his striking was his jiu-jitsu was good. His wrestling wasn't up to speed yet, but I would throw some shots and I was getting countered so fast. You know, it was tough. I had to stay at kicking range.
So how do you feel like, you know, watching him and his longevity too, like throughout the years? Is it something that and a lot of people report back then when he was coming up, he could be a little rude to his opponents.
Oh man, he was talking shit to me while he was whooping my ass. And I remember just thinking like, man, like this is not the guy you want to lose to. You know, it's easy to lose to the nice guys. But man, like I always tell people, like I don't feel like I'm not a fighter. I'm a tactician. And don't get me wrong, I'm not being falsely like it's not false humility. It's not false humility. It's hot in Arkansas. False humility. I know I'm tough. Like I'm a tough person for sure, but I'm more of a tactician. I love martial arts. I love the idea of fighting. I love the game of it. Masvidal's a real fighter. I mean, he's having fun out there. I did not have that much fun fighting. It was more the test of it that drew me to it, you know? Okay. And the best fighters they're really having fun out there. They're free. They're free of the anxiety, you know? And I was not.
Okay. That makes a lot. You know, the thing too is where he comes from, and, you know, the videos on the internet and stuff like that, you know, there's not a lot of rules and not a lot of, like, you know, governing bodies and stuff like that in those backyards, you know? It's like, and then part of being a tactician, part of that is that competition aspect where it's not really life and death. You know, you take that aspect out of it. And I don't know if that encompasses the difference, but it's very interesting that you say that.
Yeah, it's just something I've reflected on, and I'm a very measured person. You know, I don't put it all on black or all on red, and I'm an overthinker. Got a little bit of generalized anxiety, you know, and I loved MMA. I love what it did for me. I love the confidence that it gave me, and I was able to do a lot with it for being I was always like one of the last kids picked if we're playing basketball. You know, I didn't do well in any sports. I did okay in wrestling. So like to be use martial arts to be able to go in there, and I beat up a lot of athletic guys. I beat a lot of tough guys just being a crafty guy, you know. And man, martial arts is, I mean, hell, I live a great life because of it, and still do.
Yep, and you know, I appreciate all that. It's like a lifelong process with you too. You know, now the reflection comes in, and you get to look back and enjoy some of those things that you did do, because we're about to get to the good parts, man. We're not even there yet. You did have a moment where following Matt Hamilton. Now you also put students in the UFC too, so we're gonna get to that. But you're kind of on your way here. You took the 3 losses and you bounced back, and you have 4 wins in 5 fights. The middle fight is a draw with David Love. Why don't we talk about David Love? Because David Love's a guy that I booked a lot as well, and he's a guy that brought a lot of athleticism, not a lot of training, and unfortunately, path in life, he picked up MMA late in his life, in his late 20s and stuff. But he's a tough opponent for anybody. What was that fight? And a little guy, so what was that like?
I was surprised. I took him down, and that was one fight I look back on, and the second round ended. It was a 2-round fight, hence the draw, I guess. But that was one I look back. No big deal, no big feelings. But it was a bad decision. Like I'd won that fight by my estimation and by my cornerman's. But it was a cool fight. I didn't really get hit, and I took him down, which surprised me because he was a little meatball, finished the fight, with him in a triangle choke. But somehow, ended up with the draw, which, at the time was like, oh, this really sucks. But now I'm looking back like, yeah, I should have finished him, So, but yeah, David is a nice guy. We cut weight together before the fight and rode together to the airport after the fight. They had one person driving both of us. So nothing but love for Dave, and I hope everything's good with him.
And you're still booking fighters and training people out of Indiana. So, marching right along there. I'm hoping to interview David here pretty soon as well.
Nice.
Like I said, 4 wins in 5 fights. That David Love fight was the draw, but that leaves you at the Ultimate Fighter Season 8. And you still got, despite that 3-fight losing streak, an excellent record coming up, if you include also the amateur fights. But right now you're at 7-3 as a pro with, you mentioned maybe 10 amateur fights. That's not bad heading in there. What was your experience like with the whole tryouts and the whole screening process?
Yeah, it was like the biggest like head fake, because I was at the time like, I was working a good job and making good money, and I just tried out and wore the pink singlet, and the sessions were easy, the first session was grappling, and I looked good grappling my guy, threw him in a bunch of submissions and threw him in like a heel hook, and everybody's like, no, because that was when everyone was scared of heel hooks. And anyways, get past that, and then we go to the pads, and I could hit pads, and so we get to the interview, and they just liked the pink singlet. They knew, and I was kind of loose and feeling good in the interview. So they had this idea that I was this crazy guy, and I'm like pretty not crazy. I'm pretty laid back, but I played the character that it was going to take. I was in sales. I knew what they wanted to see. So that was it. And so then they were going to call you, the next night or that night if you made it, and they didn't call me. And so I was pretty sad I didn't make it because I was really thinking about it. And then at the airport the next day, they called me, and they were just busy. They just didn't get to everybody. And so I went to Vegas, and they did the last interview phase there, and then I got on the show.
Now, did you get on as an alternate, or did you get on into the full show? Because
I got into the show, and then I lost my fight to George Roop to get into the house. And I'll say, just for context, not excuses, but for context, I hadn't fought for a while between my last fight and the tryouts. I was no longer training MMA. Me and Matt had opened the gym, and I had a shoulder surgery, had a torn labrum, where it took me out of a tournament that I was, I'd fought my way into the finals, but my shoulder subluxed in a tournament, and I couldn't do the finals. And so I'm fighting for $500. Meanwhile, I'm making good money working. And so I was done fighting. We were just basically teaching kickboxing classes and teaching jiu-jitsu classes at our new gym, Westside MMA. And then you watch The Ultimate Fighter on TV, and you're like, you always think like, oh, I could do that. I could beat those guys. And so I went and tried out. You know, Matt let me use the gym money to go try out. So I flew up to Boston, tried out, made the show. And it was real obvious that the MMA that I was doing, I was behind. And so I lost to Roop, lost the decision to him, and I'm on my way back to Arkansas. I land in Dallas, and when I land, they call me because one of the guys that won ended up getting a concussion, and they had a spot for me to come back on. And so then I got to come back in because somebody got hurt. Somebody won but had stitches, or somebody, you know, or somebody lost by, somebody won by disqualification. Something happened, and they just weren't able to continue fighting, and whether it was stitches or concussion. And so they called me, and I was like, oh man. It was a weird thing because it just didn't feel over to me. It was a really surreal feeling going out there and losing and having to come home, having not made it on the show. And it just didn't feel, something didn't feel right about it. And so when I got the call, it was like, oh man, like it just like,
It felt right.
I don't know. Yeah. So then I got to go back in there, which was,
So how much actual time did you spend at the house? How's that? How much? Because they were sending you home. Now they seem to keep people, don't they? Like,
well, they sent all the losers home. That was the fight to get into the house.
oh,
So it wasn't
okay,
in the house
okay,
yet.
okay.
So we were in a hotel. Then we go to fight. I lost my fight to fight my way into the house, and so then I'm going home. And then they rerouted me back from Dallas back to Vegas, and then I was in the house.
And now you were in the show from the start. So, talk about like the big, I guess the big thing that people remember from this season is this character who's your next fight is Junie Browning.
Yeah, poor guy.
Junie Browning experience like from your perspective?
Well, I was a bit. I mean, there's a lot of ways that I was immature during that time in my life, but from the outside looking in, I mean, I was way more mature than most of these guys, of more of like frat guy kind of mentalities. Not, I mean, I was more of like a dorky, nerdy guy. Like I was already buying rental property, and I'd already had my gym established. And so I'm kind of like, you know, I'm kind of there, just not really fitting in. You know, at the time, I'm just like trying to be a good Christian boy, you know, and it wasn't a good experience for me because I don't think I was ever really being myself there. I just was trying to make sure I wasn't ever going to be portrayed like drinking or getting into fights. Like I was thinking, man, I don't want parents of like our kids program to see me acting like a fool on TV. So I really tried to play it way too clean and straight. And so it just wasn't really my, it was a tough 6 weeks for me. I mean, I lost my fight, you know, a very close fight to Junie, and it would have been great to have gotten that decision. And I didn't. It was a split decision. And so then there I was, just, you know, stuck in the house for the rest of the show. And then to be on the show for 6 weeks, if you're a broke kid, it's not that bad because you tell them what food you want. You eat like a king. They deliver whatever you want. You just gotta cook it, you know. But I was already like an adult. I already had a house. I already had enough money to go buy steak if I wanted to eat steak, or go to a nice restaurant. Or I had, you know, I enjoyed being an adult. I enjoy my freedom. So being locked in TV, being in such a alpha environment with a bunch of knuckleheads, and I was a knucklehead too, but I didn't enjoy it. Tried to take advantage of it the best I could, but it wasn't like a fun time.
Yeah, no, people describe it, you know, you know, you haven't even gotten to like, you know, the cameras in your face, you know, practically 24 hours as they say, and that whole lack of privacy, and then no communications with the world. You know, you got a house, you know, you might have a wife and family back there that you know, can't even talk to them 5 minutes on the phone and stuff like that. It's real. So a lot of people, you know, consider it a strain to do the TV show. It's not all fun and games. But if you had to describe it to someone who didn't see it, what was the Junie Browning act? What was going on with this guy? Because he came out to be one of the, memorable guys, despite not having a big UFC career.
Yeah, he was just pretty athletic, a front runner, not as much of a tough guy, in a back and forth kind of fight. It wasn't a pushover, but like more of a front runner kind of guy. And he was super obnoxious, really obnoxious, really insecure, just projecting a lot. And even to I think I was 26 at the time, I pitied the guy during the show because it was obvious, like, he didn't really have a male father figure in his life. And, he grew up in a trailer park, and I was acting the way he was acting. And I just thought, like, I know how this works for him. I know how this show ends. This is like a stereotypical, like, your time in the sun is going to pass quickly, and then you're going to be, you're probably not going to make good decisions. And yeah, man. So I think he was just young and dumb and obnoxious. And I don't have any ill feelings towards him about anything, and I wish him the best. But I think life's hard for some folks, man. And he had a lot that he could have ran with, and he didn't capitalize on it. And that he ain't the last person I've met like that. But I had a feeling that's the way it was going to be for him.
Now, you're a young guy, but obviously you got your sense about you and stuff like that. And you see people acting the fool like that, and like you said, it brings up certain emotions for you, like pity. You said, there must have been other people in the house that wanted to kick his ass, though. You know what I mean? It's like you got the chance, and then like, did that feel bad, or how did that aspect play out? Because other people probably wanted your spot, and then you kind of let him beat. You know what I mean? He beat you. I'm not saying you let him beat you, but you know what I mean. It's a little bit of a bittersweet problem.
It was bitter. It was bitter because I was so close, and I could have pushed harder, and I just feel like I could have pushed harder, and I could have gone in that fight with the mentality that I have now. Like, I do great. I wouldn't say great. I do really well on, like, the jiu-jitsu scene now. The black belt level, I hit tournaments, and I've done great competing, and I compete now with just a lot less anxiety and a lot more confidence, and just wide open. I don't fear losing. I just really compete very well now. And I didn't compete like that when I was fighting. I was always fighting not to lose. And that was such a close fight, and so many people wanted me to win that fight, including myself, and I didn't. And so that sucked. The thing people don't realize about that show is, especially back then, is like, you're basically signing these non-disclosure agreements. And if you didn't have a good showing, and I didn't have a great showing, you have to sit on that for like 6 months and know, like, you're going to have to relive it when it hits the air, and that sucked. That really, really sucked. I took the NDA, seriously. I didn't tell people anything about it. I'm sure I told Matt, but it just it wasn't. I didn't have a good showing, and I had to wait for it to air and then relive it when it aired. And it gave me a lot of perspective and a lot of empathy for people in the public eye, because I had a little taste of that, and I definitely got something out of it, but it wasn't easy, all that to say, it opened up a lot of doors.
Yeah, you have to search for something good out of all that, because, what you just described, that's the first time I've heard it described like that. But there's other guys who've probably been through that, of like, all right, that sucked. Let me put it behind me. And then 6 months, you turn on the TV and it's like, oh, there it is again. It's like, like
week by week.
or what was
Yeah,
that,
week by
Groundhog
week.
Day? Is that the name of the movie where
Yeah.
it's like you're repeating the bad scenes? Man,
Oh,
so
yeah, and the same conversations over and over again, not just for the season, but for the next couple years of your life. Every single grappling event and fight show, people wanted to talk about Junie Browning. And it's just like that's just what it is,
yeah,
and that's what it was.
yeah, it's the price you pay of fame is that.
Yeah, there's no guarantees it's going to work out exactly the way you want it to, and you can't go back and change anything. And I got a lot out of it. I ended up getting three. They brought the whole season back.
Yeah,
And so
now even though you've had an 0-2 run there and you spend the time there, the whole psychological thing, you did get a fight on the finale as well. Like you said, they brought a lot of guys back, but you got your fight on there, and this time it went your way. Was that a feeling of redemption? That's got to feel good, right?
yeah, it was great. It was great. Rogan did a real nice commentary of it was when I was on the ground. I was doing my thing, and so it was really cool to hear Rogan's commentary when I was on the ground with Volokowski. And one of the neat technical things that happened in that fight was something that what cost me the fight. One of the things that cost me the fight with Junie is that I was throwing front kicks and I was kind of just dragging them, and so they're easy to catch. And I started working out with this guy named Aaron Fisher, who is a real Muay Thai guy. He lived in Thailand, and he got me really pulling my kick straight back. And so then I got my confidence back in that kick. And so I was fighting Polakowski, who was just a hard-nosed brawler. He had 20-something kickboxing fights. He went to Thailand and fought. And so he's just coming forward, and I'm hitting him with these front kicks. And so he just keeps coming forward. I end up knocking him down with a knee and a flying knee, and ended up catching him in a arm and guillotine. But yeah, it was. I remember somebody interviewing me after that fight, and they're like, "You were 0-2 on the Ultimate Fighter, and now you're undefeated in the UFC. What's that like?" And I was like, "Exactly like it sounds, man. Like this is pretty cool,
Yeah,
It was really
yeah.
cool, actually.
You'll take it. Now, what was that contract like? I mean, like you said, you had your stuff kind of lined up on your own. Maybe the fighting wasn't life or death for you in terms of income, which
Yeah.
is a good place to be, really. That puts you head and shoulders above a lot. Some of the other guys who are more vulnerable that way. But you probably took
Yeah,
a lousy contract to sign.
it was 8-8, just was what it was. And so yeah, I was 8-8, and so I got $16,000, and I mean that's not nothing, especially then. So that was cool. And then the next fight was against
Paul Kelly.
Paul Kelly. God damn, he was big. And that was a fun fight. I don't know if you ever went back and watched it, but I was a 5-1 underdog, and he might have stole the second. I won the first round. I controlled way more of the fight in the second round, but he shook me off his back and finished with some ground and pound. None of it landed, but and then he won the third round. Clearly, I was tired, but that was a cool fight because I was such a big underdog, and people thought he was just going to mow right through me. And he'd already won the fight in the night at least once, and that was a cool fight. And that was another one where I went in there. I was so much better than him on the ground, but everything in my mind in that fight was like defensive, And if I would have trained with Paul on that day, I would have tapped Paul out as many times as I wanted to. I just the mentality is everything, and I hate that that's how my mentality was. But I have athletic induced asthma, and I think my biggest trigger is anxiety, which is a shame because I have anxiety. So I always kind of fought measured because I know what it's like to hit that wall, and when you have that asthma attack, when you're wheezing, it's just you can't gut through it. Like that's just a wall. And so I really fought a lot of my career, really measured, trying to make sure I didn't get tired. The problem with that is I got tired anyways because I was overthinking it. Now I do, you know, you're not getting punched, but I do all these grappling tournaments and stuff. And man, I grapple wide open, but I don't have the anxiety. I don't have the stress. I'm just out there just doing it. And anyways, that's a little backstory into the mentality.
I just talked to Jay Jack and Amanda Buckner, both of them, you know, pro fighters, and now, you know, and they're a couple. And they talked about they got to a certain point in their career where without going to a sports psychologist and getting over some of that, they were just going to, you know, she was losing fights that she was thinking her way through and not being lucid. And she's very, very talented, you know. So the mind is a huge thing, and you're probably one of the most eloquent people voicing that right now in terms of the stress that you actually had to deal with. Where, you know, you mentioned it early in the interview that you didn't have fun like in your career. It's not like you know, like it was that stressful to you, and that's a big difference. You know, that's a big thing to be able to put your finger on, man. That's big.
Yeah, it's wild. It's a wild thing to think about, but all those things really helped me become a better coach, and that's cool. You know, I don't love coaching MMA, but I love coaching people, and so when it's just a random person that wants to do MMA, I have no interest in messing with it. But you have these certain people that come into your life and they just suck you in because they're good people and they're doing things for the right reason, and you fall in love with them and you end up training them. It's way easier for me to train jiu-jitsu people, but whether it be jiu-jitsu or MMA or any of the combat arts, I feel like I can connect with people and kind of get in front of some of those mental blocks because I can see them coming because I've had almost all of them. So I really enjoy knowing that part of the game and being able to provide that kind of help to people, where if I was just a stone cold killer, you wouldn't even notice that stuff because it wouldn't make sense to you. Like, why would you be insecure? Why would you have anxiety? You're just going to go out there and fuck this guy up, you know? And some people just got it like that, but they may not make the best coach.
So we have overcome the weather, and we are back here, and I'm joined by Roli Delgado, and we've been discussing his UFC career and his MMA career. He came up as a pioneer, especially when you consider the Arkansas area, and you know, been through a lot of the wars here. We got to the point where you were 1-0 in the UFC, and then you got a match with Paul Kelly, and it didn't go your way, but a lot of people think you won that fight. I know your coach does.
Yeah.
I think you do, but talk a little bit about that, because you know, we've touched a little bit upon your thought processes and things. Doesn't that make all the difference in the world? You go from being 2-0 to 1-1. Like, I mean, it really makes a difference like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of luck. There's a lot of luck that goes into people's careers. There's just so many like Venn diagrams of things that are happening. And you can just control what you can. But if that decision goes my way, it's like you beat Paul Kelly, who at the time was getting a lot of press from the UFC. He was a big guy. He was a character, and it was neat to tussle with him. It was a fun fight. But yeah, like things could have went somewhere different for me. You look at, Bryce Mitchell had a war. He was extremely small in his first debut against Tyler Diamond in the UFC. That ended up being a split decision. And then Bryce goes on to build a career like 5-0. He's undefeated in the UFC. And, you just need one judge to kind of like change the story of somebody's rise. So that's like a neat thing it's a neat thing to think about, you know, like what that would have done, what that would have changed. I mean, same thing if I would have won the Junie Browning fight, like how would that have changed things? So kind of neat, you know, you could always go back and look at those things. But I lost it on the judges' cards. But you know, I was fighting a European in Europe. I could have fought better, but I did. I was a huge underdog. It was fun to get in there with somebody that was supposed to kill me and then realize like they felt pretty human, and I was able to take his back and control him very well. So you know, it was cool.
Now you know you're from Arkansas, but you're not really from Arkansas. You said you were in California, you were in Philadelphia for a little bit. You got the Cuban background. You're pretty. Was this your first overseas trip, like to fight? Obviously, I think.
No, my third fight. I was having trouble recalling it when we were talking earlier, but my third fight was actually in England. My third pro fight, and I went over there and fought a guy, a JKD guy named Neil McLeod, and yeah, I went out there and was there for a few days. That was a real cool experience. You know, I went to England, but that was my first time in Europe to fight, and I just got back from Brazil, and the exchange in Brazil was so amazing. So I went to Europe with like $50 in my pocket. I was there for like 3 or 4 days, and boy, did I get smacked with the reality of the pound at that time. And I remember it was like wow. So I didn't really have any money on that trip, and I think I made like $300 after paying my manager his cut for that fight, and the exchange rate and everything. But I got a free trip to Europe. It was my first time to go to Europe. That was like 02, 03. And I won. And so, you know, that was like I was like 3-0 as a pro, and that was something. And then I fought those three studs back to back and got dropped down to 3-3. And we covered most of that.
Yeah, yeah. But let me ask you. But we didn't touch upon how did your third fight materialize in England? How'd that get put together, Danny?
Yeah, I think it was Danny. But really, uh, the fight was for Matt Hamilton, and then he had another opportunity, and so they handed it down to me. So that's how, and I don't know how it came to Matt, but probably through Danny.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. So that's a good experience to get out of the way early. And then when you went back with Paul, maybe you had a little more than $50 in your pocket. You kind of knew
Yeah,
then.
that was a cool trip. Even that was a cool trip, and we didn't get it, but I was there with Matt. We stopped in Amsterdam on the way. We had a connection, and we got to walk around. And I really like when the guys fight overseas. I am not complaining because I live a good life, but I've been to Vegas so many times now for TJ and Bryce. Mike Wessel when he fought for us and went to the UFC. Like, I send me to Singapore, like send me to Abu Dhabi, send me back to Europe. I love going to Europe. I'd go to South America. I'd love to get another nice trip. That was one of the blessings of martial arts, all the training and traveling and fighting. You know, I've done combat wrestling and gotten to go to Eastern Europe twice. Just the traveling is a real awesome thing that comes with this game.
Yeah, and you know, Kelly and the British crowd, they can be different than the American crowd. Did you have any kind of experiences with them? Because they can be boisterous.
Yeah, it was really funny. I'm like really rarely ever take anything personally. I'm a pretty even keeled guy, and I didn't take this personally. I just thought it was so funny. I'm walking out to fight Paul Kelly, and you know, with the Paul Kelly thing, I was so reserved on the Ultimate Fighter and just like really was not myself. And so I'm weighing in with Paul Kelly. You know, and Paul Kelly's a monster of a man at 55. I mean, we cut weight in the same sauna. His back was huge, and so I'm a 45er. You know, just I literally ate like Italian food the night before the weigh-ins, and so I'm in there at the weigh-ins, and we're squared up with each other, and Paul gets right in my face, you know, like normal stuff. But then he like puts his forehead on my forehead and he starts pushing on me, you know, and he's shorter than me. Like, there's no way I'm going to be able to like hold my own here. And so it's this really weird situation where he's like in my face and his forehead's in mine. And so I just shoved him. This is on YouTube if you look up UFC 99 weigh-ins. So I just shoved him, and man, he did not expect it. So scrawny old me shoves him, and he like goes back several steps and almost falls over the scale. And man, he was fucking pissed. He's just got that Cockney accent, just like talking to me. I don't understand a word he's saying. Like literally, I could just tell he's ready to fight. And we get down the stairs and he's talking to me and they're separating us. So anyways, I'm getting ready to fight him. I'm walking out. I'm like, it's kind of funny when the guy hates you, because it's like, what's it matter? Like, we're still gonna fight whether or not we're friends or you hate me. I'm walking out there, ready to go. This guy's got his hand out to slap my hand. And so I'm walking and I'm like this, and he goes, pulls it back. He's like, oh no, fuck you, mate. I'm for Paul Kelly, rah, you know. And I just started laughing as I'm walking to the cage. I thought that was pretty funny.
That's cool. That's cool. Those are memorable but relatively mild interactions, because the Brits can be, kind of drunk and kind of toothless when they're at the bottom end.
Yeah. No, it was minor, but that was the extent of anything I really dealt with.
Now, since we're getting to retouch base here, and you've come across as a family man and that kind of thing. Did you take your family on some of these trips, like at some point?
Well, at this point, my son was a baby, so he didn't go. For the Paul Kelly fight, my ex-wife met me. She didn't go for the week leading up, but she met me in England. And so we did that fight, and then we traveled to Italy, and
Cool.
I think we did Italy and France after that. Yeah. So we made a trip out of that. It was nice. Yeah, Italy and France. That's what we did.
Sweet. You mentioned a stopover in Amsterdam. Are you a pothead? Do you smoke? What side are you on?
Yeah. At that, I didn't start smoking weed until my early 30s, so that was a non-issue for me. I that wasn't interested in that. I kind of use it as a sleep aid now, sometimes, but I'm not like a big pot. It sedates me so much. I'm not somebody that can function on it. So it's like something to help like put me to sleep. That's pretty much all I use it for from time to time.
Oh, that's cool. So Amsterdam, then there's still a lot to see there, but a lot of people get lost in that culture. You know what I mean? And it was unusual because now you can find that somewhere in the States, right? But back then it was unusual. So I figured I'd just check in with that. So you're 1-1 heading out of the Paul Kelly fight. You have a good experience with the trip and stuff like that. Do you feel like the UFC likes you, or they're indifferent? Like you mentioned when you tried out, like you had several like stops at the casting, where like you had to talk to fight people and then non-fight people, TV people, and you kind of get shoved into a mold kind of things. How's your overall feeling now, 1-1?
I kind of just tried to play the character that they were looking for TV to get on the show. But then once I was there, I don't have any bad feelings towards the UFC whatsoever. I was there, and I didn't do great on the show. I won on the finale. Then they fed me to Paul Kelly, which was the idea was to give Paul a good fight, And I've been like, after that fight, Dana White went into Paul Kelly's room and was like, "What happened?" Because it was a very close fight, and I'm long and lanky and a lot smaller than Paul, so they expected, and the odds makers expected Paul to just mow right through me. But I don't take that to any offense whatsoever. But yeah, so I did that fight, and then after that, they booked me with Andre Winter, which Winter was a great striker and a finalist on The Ultimate Fighter. So for sure, an underdog in that fight. But there wasn't any easy fights. Man, I had worked so much on my boxing, and I didn't have a lot of faith in my wrestling and my conditioning because of the asthma and stuff. Um, so I went out there and I thought I was going to box with Andre Winter. And dude, he knocked me down early with a right hand counter over my jab. I woke up on the floor, popped right back up to my feet. I knew what happened. I knew it was the right hand. And we went back to it. And then I was waking up and I didn't see the second right hand. But when I was waking up, I didn't say what happened. I knew exactly what happened and I knew what he hit me with. That was a weird fight because I took it the best of all my losses because it just was what it was. You know, it was what it was. He was a much better striker. It was very easy for him to exploit me. It happened. He knocked me out. I couldn't have done anything as far as like in my willpower differently. I could have been strategically better. So I took the fight really well. But at the time, my phone didn't work. This was years ago overseas. So when I get back into, they played that fight as a filler fight on the pay-per-view. So when I get back to the States, my phone just starts blowing up with people checking on me to see if I'm okay. And so that was kind of weird, like that delay, like it had been 4 or 5 days and all these text messages and voicemails were popping up from friends checking in to see if I was okay. But that was my third fight where I lost and then I got cut after that.
Yeah. So what makes you think you got? Why'd you get? I mean, 1 and 2, you're at risk. You know, you just gotta face facts. But in the weight class, you got good competitive fights going on. Although there are a lot of guys that go get beyond 1 and 2 and have 10, 12 fight runs. Is that something you think about also? Because
No, I'm not what the UFC is going to be able to build. I'm not a brawler. I'm not going to stand in the pocket and bang. And I don't have the look. I don't have the attitude. So they're really, from a business perspective, like there's no reason to double down on me. It's not the business of like, you're not in the business of being like a nice guy as far as the organization's concerned. They're just trying to build stars and make exciting fights. And I'm not trying to be like super no, I like above it. I just understood it. I was like, yeah, man, I got cut. Like I would love to have got another fight in there, but I tried to fight my way back in. I think I won my next. I think I won like 3 more fights, at least 2 more, and then I had my last loss, which I retired on. But like I was like, well, I'm young. I was still getting better, and so yeah, I ended up doing a tune-up fight in Little Rock. And I won that by decision, and it felt like a tune-up fight. I was out there more or less using that fight as like hard.
Let me take you back. So how does the cut come? Joe Silva calls you at that time?
Joe Silva called, and I didn't get the phone call, and so he left me a voicemail just saying, "Hey man, like you dropped your last 2." My record at that point was like, I don't know, it was a pro 8-5 or something. And as a matter of fact, it was 8-5 as a pro, not including anything that happened on The Ultimate Fighter. So he just left me a voicemail, and that was that.
Did you keep the voicemail?
No, I didn't give it. I didn't even give it that kind of thought, to be honest. I never even thought about whether or not to keep the voicemail or not. It just was what it was.
For any future fighters out there, if you have a voicemail like that, call Miguel and ask him if you should erase it or keep it first before. No, it would be interesting because what was I mean, just that kind of lets you give, like you said, you got the message, I think, because voicemail is kind of a cold way to receive that kind of news, But don't you think? Did you feel a little
yeah, in a perfect world, he could have been like, "Hey, give me a call back," and done it in person. But honestly, Miguel, like, no, I'm not arguing that. Like, yeah, like in a perfect world, he should have you should talk to somebody in person if you're gonna because this is like a lot of people's world, like it's their entire world. And I was a bit detached from it. It was a bit. I mean, I was very happy to be there, but it just seemed so surreal the whole time. And then, I know I lost the last two fights, and they cut me, and it was just like, well, there it is. I thought that might happen, and it happened. Um, and
Let me ask
that
you,
happened with.
I was just going to
Go
ask you,
ahead.
looking back at it, like skill wise, let's put that aside because skill wise, you belong. But like, is it a personality thing where it's just like not your thing? It's like why
Oh,
like
um, again, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome or a little bit of that. Never being an athletic guy. Every fight that I had and that I booked after my first amateur fight was just to see, can I do the next thing? Can I beat the next guy?
like a
And
personal challenge.
yeah, and so I don't know, man. I didn't get too caught up in it. I
Yeah,
didn't get too caught up in being a UFC fighter.
I think that's what I was getting at. Is like you're not like I don't see you throwing like the fighter lifestyle around. Like that's not you.
And I just felt real appreciative to be there. Was hoping to catch a few breaks, maybe have 5, 6 fights in the UFC. Uh, I just looked at it like I just want to win the one in front of me, like that next one. I never thought 2, 3, 4 fights down the road. Um, I was trying to become a better fighter, and I was exposed to so much more MMA from the Ultimate Fighter. We kind of stagnated in Arkansas for a little while because it's such an island, and we were the only people really doing it. And so when I got to the Ultimate Fighter, I learned the cage wrestling. I learned a lot more of like movement on pad work. It seemed like a lot of the pad work we would do in the gym, we were a bit more stationary. Like there were so many things that I was improving on, and I just kept trying to get better, and I lost, and I didn't quit. I went on and fought a few more times to
Yeah,
try and
you
get back
seem
in
like
there and keep doing it.
let me see if are you like what you don't like? You like the fighting, you like the competition, but you don't like the whole fighter lifestyle. The whole like you said, go to Vegas and be there out with the people. Get your bar set aside for the post fight party. That's not you.
Yeah, not really. Um, yeah, I did. I really like the fight. I love the challenge of it. I mean, what a cool opportunity that we have in such a civilized nation that we can have this sport that you can go train in to like mimic a gladiatorial fight, like to challenge yourself and get back to whatever is in our DNA when we had to do this stuff. I love MMA. I mean, I was an unconfident kid. I'm a very confident adult. And it's because of MMA. I had uh, so many opportunities to build my character and build my toughness and go back and like maybe I quit a little early in a training session or I was a little gun shy from a bigger puncher. And like I squashed all of those things and really became a good, well-rounded fighter. I really did. I became a good, well-rounded fighter. And I had one genetic piece of advantage, and I'm tall for my weight class.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I didn't have the toughest mind. I'm not fast twitch. I'm not strong. I'm not flexible at all. And somehow I got to fight in the UFC and I got to win there and I got to win in Bellator and I got
Let's
to do
talk
this
about
for a living.
that because you said you left the UFC, and even though um we talked about some of the things that you didn't like about it. You did set a goal to go back. You worked your way back. You got a couple of wins. The third win in that streak was in Bellator. Now,
Yeah.
Bellator sometimes, you know, in general rhetoric gets called like a UFC competitor. How did that feel going from the big show to Bellator? Is there a difference like that you notice? Like, okay, this is
Well,
not the same guy.
yeah, the production crew and the weigh-ins, the traveling between the venue and the traveling between the venue and the event. Like, it really wasn't. It felt great to fight on Bellator. I had beaten this guy in Oklahoma City, and he was the matchmaker's friend and student, and I was very respectful. The kid had just lost his father. I got really fortunate, subbed him real quickly, and I was very respectful. And so that guy really liked me. And when they brought actually, you know, the Bellator fight was one of my favorite fights because it was Jamil Massoud. He was one of David Strasser's guys from Wisconsin. You know, Jamil's a savage. Like, Jamil looks just like me. He's not the most like athletic guy, but like had an international kickboxing experience, a good broad range of fights. And so beating Jamil in Bellator and fighting on Bellator as trying to get back to the UFC, like a pit stop at Bellator, even though it felt like a regular show because I was on the undercard. It did not feel anything like the UFC. I mean, I didn't like stub my nose at it at all. I fought there, I won, and I was the second fight of the night. I got done with that fight winning, which I was super happy about because it was a tough fight, and it was my third fight in a row. So I'm like building momentum back. I'm like, let's go. You know, we go eat at this really nice restaurant. A friend of mine was in my corner. He works on Wall Street. He always goes big when we go out to eat. I'm like, we're going. I open the door, walk outside. It's still light out. That was so weird because I was used to fighting, you know, at the end of the night. It's like 7 o'clock in the afternoon. I've already fought. The night's over. I'm limping to dinner. Super cool. But Bellator is not the UFC as far as I don't know what it's like now because I haven't had any fighters in Bellator recently. But at that time, it was nothing like the UFC. The UFC is really like what a machine. Wow.
Yeah. And I understand, and the opponents too. Although Jamil's about as tough as they come, I actually took Jamil to Japan for fights a couple of times with Strasser, so I'm very familiar with him, the sergeant, and you know, a 50 fight club guy, you know, a guy with a lot of fights and a lot of experience. So that's a good win. I'm sorry that, you know, on his part that you got him when, you know, he had that personal stuff going on because.
Well, that wasn't Jamil that had the personal stuff. That was Brandon Shelton.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm glad that's not the case with Jamil, just because I know him pretty well. He's going to be on here to do this interview sooner or later, as soon as I get him.
Yeah, nothing but respect for him, man. Nothing.
So what happens with Bellator though? Because now you're a UFC vet, you were on the TV show, which gives you, you know, as you said, some notoriety, especially, you know, in Bellator's simplistic, you know, way of looking at things, that you know, you get credit for that. Did they ever try to bring you back? You know,
no, nothing ever really happened. A guy named Brian was my manager. I forget his last name. He had nothing ever bounced up. I thought I'd get another call from Bellator after that, but it was, I just don't think they noticed me. It was just an undercard fight. I was willing to drive in. There was no travel. They thought I was local, but I was 5 hours away, you know, but like it was just I don't think I was even on the radar. Or maybe I was because they had Jamil, you know, and they were trying to use it. It was supposed to be an alternate match for a tournament coming up, I think. I don't know, but nothing ever came of it. And that was that.
like, it's a quality match. It doesn't belong, based on both of your experiences, it doesn't belong, you know, second up on one of their cards, especially when, you know, at the time they may have been doing, you know, 15, 18 fights, which is, you know, a long day.
Yeah. And dude, me and Jamil had a lot of experience. That was a cool fight. I remember somebody interviewed Jamil about the fight and beforehand. And I remember Jamil saying, like, you know, of course he thought he was going to win. And he was like, look, like, he's not a bad fighter, but he's not an A-level fighter. He lost to Junie. He lost to whoever. Like, he's just not like a top level fighter. And I remember reading that interview or watching it. I don't remember if it was one or the other. But I remember seeing that and thinking, yeah, man, like that's a pretty logical thing to say. Like I got those losses. Like I wasn't even mad. I was like, like you for sure are going to be underestimating me a little bit. Um, but like, you can't help but not know what you don't know. But like everything you're saying right now is like pretty logical, man. He wasn't talking trash, just like, yeah, like I'm a better fighter and I've got more experience and this guy's good, but he's not the top tier kind of guy. And I just snuck it in on him. So it was a good win. I respected him a lot. So coming up with that win from him it was one of those things like he's a
Yeah,
good
no,
fighter, and I got the best of him that night. And it was 2 rounds to 1. It wasn't like it wasn't like I dogged him out or nothing. It was just a good clean fight.
yeah, and that's here's the thing is you're talking about Jamil's also a classy individual as well, and even then, they didn't have to shit talk for there to be mind games going on and motivate, saying something that this guy put on his freaking locker, and, taking the words to heart and stuff. That stuff all goes on at a pretty high level, and it doesn't have to be, shoving everybody in the weigh-ins and stuff. It's very interesting because that's a match I would have liked to have seen, back in the day there. So as you said, here you got the 3 fights in a row. You thought Bellator might call, but they didn't call. So something called Show Fight pops up. Now, if I'm not mistaken, is this fights that are in on Showtime?
No, it was just this guy in Missouri. He had a lot of money and not a lot of sense. And he tried to put on this major pay-per-view event. And he just blew a ton of money on this show and tanked it. He had Carol Parisian, Shoni Carter I don't know if Shoni fought, but he was there. They were all, Ronda Rousey was in attendance, a bunch of Armenians from Go-Cars. There was all these UFC vets there. Brian Gasaway was fighting. It was like crazy.
Yeah.
And so I fought Chris Grutzemacher, tough, hard-nosed guy. And so prior to this fight, I have a little bit of a layoff because I had surgery on my wrist and surgery on my middle knuckle. The sheathing on my knuckle was torn, and so it was always swollen and hurting. So while they repaired my wrist, I had them repair my knuckle. I wait the 6 months to do the recovery, and
Oh, sorry.
that's okay. Got an extra tab open.
Yeah.
So I do my recovery and I go out there and I study this film on Grutzemacher, and Grutzemacher is a grinder, like just plain and simple. And like he kind of like steps to people with this double jab. And I had been boxing a ton. And so I knew in my soul when he came to jab me, I was going to throw a right hand counter and I was going to crack him. I just saw the film, I knew it. And boy, we go out there in the first round, and I just kind of had my hands low, and I stayed away from him the same way Andre Winter knocked me out. Grutzemacher comes in with the jabs, crack, and then I broke my knuckle. I don't know. You can see it here how it's just not there anymore, and that knuckle was repaired on the sheathing. And I don't know if from being in a cast, if it I didn't give it enough time afterwards, but I broke my middle knuckle on the side of his head. And then first round was pretty competitive, and but I didn't have that. I just kept fighting like normal, but trying not to throw my right hand and throwing it out of habit a few times. I coupled that with his steady pressure, and he ended up stopping me by ref stoppage in the third round. I didn't really take that much damage as far as my face was concerned, but it was a reasonably good stoppage. I was exhausted. My hand was broken. The end of that fight, kind of tough, right? Because I'm on a 3-fight win streak. It really puts a stop to it. It was a winnable fight. I lose it. And I'm going home, with a broken hand. And I'm driving home. I tell the guy like, hey, I'll just mail me my check. Like, I'm not going to go wait in line for my check with all these other fighters. Like, just mail it to me, And the guy runs out of money. And just like, there's 2 people that don't get paid on the show, and it's me and I don't know who the other guy was. Maybe they got paid. So the matchmaker is the guy that like has the license. He's not the money guy, and he he's like, look, man, I'm really sorry. This guy's a flake and blah, blah, blah. I don't want to lose my license. Like, if you'll give me some time, I promise you I'll pay you. And so, long story short, I give the guy some time. He communicates with me. He does pay me like months later as I finally get paid. But I broke my hand and I had fight insurance. And so I turn it in. They request additional information. And I'm just like, fuck it. And so I just paid the $600-700 because I'm like, I don't do paperwork. And so I'm horrible at it. And so I pay the $600 or $700 to get my hand fixed. I don't win the fight. I'm not getting paid the $2,500, and I think I'm gonna get, and I end up getting paid eventually. And I'm looking at all this, and I just retired. And I was like, I'm not making any money. I'm not making any money. I got to go win another 2-3 fights in a row to then try to get lucky and see if the UFC will have me back. And I'm cutting weight all the time. I've had a lot of fights. I'm not making any money. And so I quit fighting and took a little time. And then I went and tried another business. I stayed at the gym, but I opened a pawn shop, did that for a couple of years and ended up selling that. But like, I just transitioned out of, like, it just got to a little point where that last broken hand and not making any money, like literally, like, it's nothing, like I flew out Jerome Levy, who's the wrestling coach for the Atos team, to work out with me for a week. I paid for that. Well, we paid for it because Matt helped me pay through the gym. But, and that's what retired me. Just the squeeze wasn't worth the juice anymore. It was people are like, oh, I don't want to retire on a loss. Like, it's easy.
Yeah.
It's easy to retire on a loss.
I think you're trimming a lot of the fat because you can get not delusional, but you can still chase an illusion, of like, I'm still good, I'm still a fighter and stuff like that. But, it's now 10 years later and you're still showing me that hand. That's something that not a lot of people take into account. You just keep on fighting, but, it's a smart move. Now, I give credit to Matt as a mentor as well. And him and yourself had teamed up to create a gym in the Arkansas area. And at some point that you've been the guy kind of head coaching kind of thing, bringing guys to the UFC. Why don't you talk about, returning to the UFC this time with guys that are drinking up your experience and our 2.0 kind of generation?
Yeah. Well, and I do want to say, Matt, like when we brought up TJ Brown, like Matt, UFC, more to do with that than I did. And with Mike Wessel, we had equal parts. So it kind of like, I had more to do with Bryce, but Matt was, I just want to mention that Matt was really big and there's other guys making it as well. And we had guys that came up with us that didn't make it to the UFC with us, but we built them and then they went on and, went to other places and ended up making it into the UFC as well. So yeah, me and Matt got this great gym in Little Rock. I mean, it's everything. It's a home for people that don't have another place. It's a high level boxing gym. I mean, Matt has some boxers that show up at these tournaments and whip up guys that come from boxing gyms. Matt's a fantastic boxing coach. We've got jiu-jitsu people, really high, world class, literally, they're not a word we throw around, literally world class people there, coaching and competing. We've had world champions. I have world champion coaches. Not only is the integrity of the combat sports there, but it's a huge gym. There's 350 students. We were able to buy our own building, and it's a very nice building. It's probably one of the nicest gyms in this part of the country. And so me and Matt did this thing in 2006. Really didn't know what we were doing, but we were good at fighting and coaching. And me and him have been partners, and we have not liked each other and liked each other on and off throughout years. But we've always trusted each other, never had an argument about money. we're still friends today. We run the gym together, and it's been like it's been a big blessing, a big opportunity, a big great, like, I'm thankful I took the leap kind of thing for me, and I know he feels the same way. I mean, we got a good thing there. We got great employees, from our manager to all the coaches. We have great students that just love us and love each other. That West Side MMA gym is, anybody that's come from there will tell you, like, it's a great place, man. I love it.
Yeah, Matt gave us a little virtual tour of it. You're not kidding around. These guys have like 3 garage doors lined up that they open up to give themselves more mat space, with like mat space on one side, mat space on the other. It's really unique as well. It doesn't look like a cookie cutter place. It looks like you guys
Yeah.
like laid it out with a lot of love.
Yeah, and Matt really did. I was going through a real rough patch when we were building that place out, and it was a real tough time for me. And Matt really took lead on the general contracting and dealing with all that stuff. One of our students helped us out a lot, but man, thank goodness he did, because I just didn't have the bandwidth. And I'll tell you, I wouldn't have spent the money he spent. And now that it's spent, it's all.
Got
Yeah, but
frozen.
I was saying I wouldn't have spent the money he spent on some stuff, but it all worked out. I mean, we're fine. I was just I have a lot of anxiety naturally, so I was just like looking at the budget, and of course, that this was our budget, and we spent twice that. But that was the nature of the time as well. But I was saying, like, he made that place happen. We were on a time crunch, and getting out of an old lease and getting into the new building, and I'm just tickled to death with it. Like, in that space, we don't have to think about anything else. Like, we've got a fixed mortgage, and we're never gonna move from there. Like, there's no more like we've got our roots now. It's close to downtown. It's fundamentally downtown.
Yeah,
I'm real
it's
pleased
home.
with it. I'm real pleased with the business, and I'm real pleased with what we're doing with the programs and the fighters. And we got TJ Brown there. We got I had to go to the dentist today with my son, but I was able to have a Division I wrestler and another one of our students that were running the practice, and Bryce Mitchell came in. And so we had a very specific practice set up for Bryce, and I wasn't even there, and everything ran really smooth. Bryce got what he needed, and then TJ was in tonight, hitting pads with Matt, and it's just, we're just like, we don't want to be a big fight gym. We don't want 30 guys. We want to have a couple key guys. We'll bring in out of towners to help make a camp when we need to. We have our specialists in jiu-jitsu, wrestling, boxing that can work with the MMA guys, and it's kind of neat. Like, we just kind of doing our thing, not trying to be American Top Team, not trying to be Jackson Wink or whoever the next big places. No, we got a little sweet spot, a couple high level guys. We try to do what we can to network and bring other guys in to work with them, or we'll send them off for camp sometimes, do a couple weeks somewhere. We got Bryce getting ready right now. We got TJ Brown getting ready, and I think they're staying home for this camp, and we're doing right by them, and just doing our thing.
Cool. So now, you didn't answer my question though. So how does it feel for you going back to the UFC now as a corner and a coach? Because the company's gotten bigger. It's gotten more of a machine. Is it noticeable?
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. Just they pick you up, with the limo service at the airport, and they've got your rooms just ready to go for you. The itinerary is laid out very clearly. They've got people making meals for the fighters during the weight cut, and they're really good meals. I mean, they have nutritionists on staff, like, designing these meals and checking the fighters. They've got portable saunas available for you, so you don't have to go and like share a YMCA sauna or something like that. Everything's really
Everybody go
scheduled.
to Gold's Gym.
What's that? Yeah, Gold's Gym. Yeah. It's just and we're in Vegas all the time, which I can't stand Vegas, but they got the PI there. It's just like absolutely just to see what a $4 billion company is. It's just insane, man. It's just mind blowing. I mean, you remember the days like when I was coming up and you know, like just the idea that one company could capture the entire market like that and just own it, you know, like the UFC is incredible. So going back there now, it's even bigger than it was when I was fighting there. It's bigger than what it was like when I was there. But like when, even though it's so huge now, all this is going on, it's a bigger, more, bigger. It's the same. Like I just want these guys to win. I just want TJ and Bryce to just to get everything they can out of this because I know you know like it is what it is and then it's gone and then you're on to the rest of your life. So I want them to make every dollar they can make right now and that means they got to win the next fight. You know, I want them to feel fulfilled with their career. And so that's the only thing I care about. It's really an inconvenience to be in Vegas for 5 days, even though you're in a hotel and you're at the UFC and like you get to walk past all these big names. I don't give a shit. Like I want to be home. I live a good life. I love my wife. I love my dog. I love my gym. I love my friends. I love my mother-in-law. I love my mother. I got a great thing here. I'm in Vegas for 5 days. There's only 2 days that matter: the weight cut and fight day. You know, but you got to be there with the guys, and I'm lucky to do it, and I'm thankful to do it for them. But it's a servitude thing. I'm there to serve them. I'm not there to enjoy the ride because I don't. It's not a ride for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's almost like,
And I'm not trying to take it for granted. I'm not taking it for granted. It's just, it's not my ego. I don't need them to win for my ego. I truly want them to win because I know what it's like to be them. And those wins are so relieving. And I don't, you know, when you're sitting them with them in the losses, I know what it feels like. So the empathy just kills me. Not the sympathy, the empathy, you know?
and you what you described this is that the team camaraderie, the gym. This is a service to your gym too. You have to put this time in for your gym as well. You know what I mean? As a to go and be there for them. It seems that way. So very much a martial artist till the end there, Raleigh. Very much enjoyed the interview. Um, you know, a great career because not a lot of people get to go out a little bit earlier, but without having to string together a bunch of losses or anything like that, that gets the picture skewed. You got a totally positive record, even though not in the UFC, but a lot of tough fights and a lot of good performances. So I always enjoyed watching you, and I always, you know, I got to book you for that Masvidal fight, which at the end of the day turned out to be one of your more memorable fights too. So I'm glad we got to share some experiences together. And another mutual experience is respect for Danny Dring and Matt Hamilton and the Arkansas crew, the original guys from down there, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. We didn't know we were pioneers. We were just doing this little subculture of a sport, you know, and then it blew up into this. And yeah, it's I'm glad to have got to see it. Still, I still got a couple young fighters that suck me into working with them right now. And yeah, like it's been a great ride. Martial arts has been great for me. I've enjoyed. I appreciate you thinking of me and having me on this. I look forward to sharing it. I don't talk about this stuff very much, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that have been in the gym that never got to know me as a fighter. I don't tell war stories, but I'll share this. And I know a lot of my newer students are going to watch this and they're going to get a glimpse of me that they wouldn't have gotten a glimpse of. And that's so thank you for that. That's, I don't know how many people are going to see it, but it's going to mean a lot to some people, I think.
And I appreciate that because I don't really do it for the views. I kind of do it for myself because I do think that there's something important there that we have to document. A lot of what you said, is very personal for yourself. That's, what you're talking about, that it'll appeal to your students and stuff. But that's because, it's funny. I have that same feeling. I did my shows and I had my run and stuff like that. I don't like to talk about that with anybody. I can't imagine how it must feel to you guys where it's like, you know, what you experience is even more unique. You know what I mean? It's like the actual physical combat in there. How, well, you said you can't have these people have no empathy. They're just talking to you. You know, they have no shared common experience. So yeah, I appreciate you opening up and being very philosophical for us here. Thank you, man.
Yeah, my pleasure, brother. Well, I hope our paths cross again sometime.
For sure, man. I'll see you soon.
Take care.